Britain says it has limited but persuasive information that Syria may have used chemical weapons, including sarin gas. The Foreign Office called it extremely concerning, distressing and stressing that the use of such weapons would be a war crime. They've urged President Assad to cooperate with international bodies to prove he did not sanction their use. The White House said if a red line had been crossed, they would consult their allies on the next step. A warning: this report by our Foreign Affairs correspondent Jonathan Rugman does contain some distressing images.
On March the 19th, these pictures emerged from Al-Ortaiba, east of Damascus, apparently showing victims of a chemical weapons attack. Now the White House is saying that US intelligence agencies believe, with, quotes, varying degrees of confidence, that the Syrian government has used such weapons. But it hasn't said where, and there are caveats. The evidence doesn't constitute conclusive proof. The use was, quotes, small scale in 2 places. The US Defense Secretary, speaking in the Gulf, said this assessment had only been made in the last 24 hours.
The US intelligence community assesses with some degree of varying confidence that the Syrian regime has used chemical weapons on a small scale in Syria, specifically the chemical agent sarin. We cannot confirm the origin of these weapons, but we do believe that any use of chemical weapons in Syria would very likely have been originated with the Assad regime.
Last November, Syrian rebels said they had found chemical weapons with instructions on how to use them. If President Assad's forces have used the deadly nerve agent sarin, that constitutes a war crime. And it's now an open question as to whether the so-called red line justifying an American response has been crossed.
The President of the United States said that if the Bashar Assad used chemical weapons, it would be a game changer, that it would cross a red line. I think it's pretty obvious that red line has been crossed.
John McCain's demanding the creation of a no-fly zone, and he wants to arm Syrian rebels. But President Obama in Texas today is being rather more cautious. This was the grand opening of his predecessor's presidential library. But while the Bush administration pushed the intelligence to breaking point ahead of war with Iraq in 2003, Obama is apparently doing the opposite, searching for corroboration, consulting with allies, because Syria is a war that he does not want. The Foreign Office said tonight it had limited but persuasive evidence of chemical weapons use, including sarin, after the Foreign Secretary sounded the alarm 10 days ago.
The UK is increasingly concerned that there is evidence of the use of chemical weapons in Syria. These allegations must be fully and urgently investigated.
Today, pictures emerged of Syrian jets apparently carrying out airstrikes on the town of Qusair near the Lebanese border. But use of chemical weapons could be a game changer for this conflict. If, as it seems, America's red line has been crossed, Washington has to decide how to respond.
Jonathan Rugman. Well, let's go live now to our Washington correspondent, Matt Fry. Matt, what's interesting is that coming out of Washington, there seems to be a degree of caution about this, as if they don't really want to have to find that Assad's used chemical weapons.
I think you've hit the nail on the head, John. In fact, you heard it in Jonathan's piece as well. He does not want this war with Syria or in Syria or any kind of American military involvement because he doesn't know what's going to work. And also think of the poignant historical context today of those presidents appearing at the opening of the George W. Bush Library in Texas, where there's an awful lot of floor space devoted to justifying the war in Iraq, a war that Barack Obama himself was against. They don't want to repeat the mistakes of history of going in on flimsy intelligence. But even more importantly, John, they don't want to go in when they don't know exactly how this is going to pan out, whether a no-fly zone is actually workable, whether sending weapons, American weapons, to the rebels will just arm the wrong kind of rebels. So, as ever, even if this is some sort of game changer, they are really caught between a rock and a hard place. And I think the crucial thing, John, will be the amount of sarin used, by whom, against whom, and if there are pictures of the extent of it and the result of it.
Matt Fry in Washington.